Hello and welcome everybody to another show of Bitcoin Live, the bigger picture with me, Nick, and my co-host Sid.
Hey,
How are you, Sid?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good too. I want to say thank you also to our sponsors, Quantum Economics and Quantum Expeditions and Shield Folio, and of course our friends at The Organized Media. All of us together make this possible. I usually forget that because I have so much stuff on my plate. And today I also got a ton of clips ready to go. That's why we started 30 minutes late as usual. But before we go into all of that, and time travel and time anomalies and Razor Giorgiani and a lot of cool stuff, you also wanted to say something.
Yeah. So this week, actually last week, Zahi Hawass went to Joe Rogan podcast. So I have some comments about that. So before I've heard about this name all like for a very long time, everybody talks about it. That guy is an asshole. Now after watching that episode, I'm sure why they said that because this guy is so arrogant, and then like he's not even ready to listen to other people's point of view. Joe Rogan, just at the end of this episode, Joe Rogan said, "Do you believe in aliens?" And he said, "No, I'm a scientist. I don't believe in aliens." He said, "Is there no possibility in the universe that alien exists?" He said, "No." And then he said, "Thank you very much," and then left. This is how he ended that thing. And Joe Rogan was not talking about build alien building pyramids. He was just talking about the possibility of alien existing in this universe. And then he was so arrogant. But there were a few things which I noticed. So he denied everything like uh, about finding those structures in the pyramid. He said there is no evidence for it. So I don't know who spreaded the rumor that Zahia was saying that he is taking that seriously. He didn't talk to those scientists and he didn't take them seriously. Joe Rogan said that if I try to hook you guys up and try to do a meeting with you guys, he said sure, but he was not interested in that. So I think somebody spreaded the rumor that Zahia was endorsing it. Secondly, he said there were few things. So he rejected carbon dating. He said, "I don't believe in carbon dating." Yeah, I was
I
like,
don't believe in
"Whoa."
carbon dating.
Yeah, I was like, "What?"
So that's an unusual statement from an archaeologist.
Exactly. He said, "No, I don't believe in carbon dating."
Okay.
So, okay, I was like, "What the hell?" And the only scientific method, according to him, is he find a pottery from one place, and if you find another pottery from a different place, then he matches one with another and decide that this is from this time period. There is
Well,
no scientific method over there. He just like going by his mental thought that
well,
okay, this pottery he found and he believe it's from 3000 BC. If he finds somewhere else same thing, it's from 3000 BC. No scientific method. I was like, okay man, I don't believe these guys at all. And according, yeah,
then he basically destroys his own credibility, right? If he
he
says there's no scientific method to what I'm saying, why should we
no,
believe
he
him
called
anyway?
it a scientific method, this process. I think
Oh,
that's
okay.
like the opposite of the science. But he's saying this is the scientific method, not carbon dating.
Well, he is partly true, right? I mean, a lot of archaeology is speculation based on, a couple of finds, and you find a bone here, and then it completely changes the timeline, right? It
Yeah,
happened a couple of times that they found something, and that they had to readjust the entire human
yeah,
development, right? So it's a
yeah.
lot of speculation and interpretation
It's
based on very little evidence.
yeah, speculation is a part of scientific method. That's how you start your scientific like
Yeah, how you
scientific
build
research. Yeah,
hypothesis.
but denying everything else, like I don't believe in 100% on carbon dating, but it is proven to be a very good method in so many other places. So I don't know what was he thinking, and so disappointed. And I really hope he get retired so real scientists can come and take over.
Yeah, but it was cool that he went on Joe Rogan and to you could have also not come on, right? So he made a fool of himself, and
Yeah,
we respect him for doing that, right?
yeah. He did believe in magic, though. He said there
Oh,
was
magic.
there. Yeah, he said, yeah, I believe in magic. There was.
Okay.
He said they didn't use it to build pyramid, but I do believe magic existed in that time. So pharaohs and all those people were using magic.
Okay.
And then Joe Rogan asked, "What do you think magic is?" He said, "I don't know. I can't say, but I know there was something, and they were using it."
Okay. Wow. Wow.
And then
I,
he is firm believer that these pyramids are the tombs. I don't
yeah.
know why.
Even though they never found a buried body in there,
Exactly. No,
anyway.
he was saying he found some sarcophagus and stuff. I don't know, but he do believe that they are just tombs, and I don't know. I don't see a reason for it. Anyway,
No, and then we will return to the pyramids quite a lot of times, going forward, because they play a central role.
yeah.
And like we said, they're all over the place, like in many different continents.
Exactly. One last thing he said, like it's a Egyptian national project, and only Egyptians were doing that. What I think, like, this is a baseless thing because we find pyramids everywhere in the world, Bosnia, China,
Yeah,
and so many other places. So how is that a national project?
yeah.
It's
This one
not
is,
a
by the
national
way,
project. Yeah.
might be a nice one to pull up right now. I got it ready. I didn't have a way to fit it in, but Jay Anderson did this one. You can see all the places over here, like Giza, and
Hmm.
all the famous the Nazca Lines and Easter Island, and they all lie on this exact line around the Earth, right? So it's very remarkable that these places from different cultures and different times match up on the exact the same. Uh,
Huh.
that's very interesting, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I really am more confident that something else was going on after listening to Zahi Hawass, because he made a very poor argument, and this is one of those things, like why they are everywhere.
And why
Yeah,
why do they look alike, right? I mean, why do they have the
exactly.
same building style and the same mathematical precision? All these
Yeah,
kind of things, and why do they match up with these astrological signs, these star signs, right? What's up with that? But there was also other news, and I do want to highlight it because who knows, it might play a part in a future episode. But there was a big news, and I sent it to you. The Daily Mail and some other outlets covered it, and they said Bible archaeologist delivers bombshell new analysis of Noah's Ark site as radar reveals angular shapes and hallway. Here's some pictures from it, and they didn't use the SAR technology, right? The Doppler SAR technology that they used, that Philip Biondi used for
yeah,
the Giza Plateau, but they basically use similar technology, but that doesn't reach very deep underneath the ground.
yeah,
So, and but I do want to say a couple of things about it, like and then you can go. Right. First of all, I mentioned exactly a scenario in the Project Bluebeam episode. I think episode 2 or 3, where what if they found Noah's Ark? What if they dug it up and it turned out to be like a spaceship? Would that blow sort of the archaeological field out of the water? Well, right now they already found sort of these structures underneath the Giza plateau, so they don't need Noah's Ark. But they do found it very interesting that that this came out. Plus, so they found these structures that sort of fit the measurements that are given within the Bible. It sort of matches up with the boat-shaped structure that they found there. Plus, there's like a difference in the soil structure, which is different from the boats. Sort of what supposedly is the ship. It is different from the soil surrounding it. So there's like a clear, distinct signature of the soil. And there's some other aspects that's at least intriguing. And I do hope that they continue to research this area, but they aren't allowed to do that, which is
yeah,
also interesting and a recurring feature.
yeah. But about this specific, Turkey have an issue with stuff like that. But this
With
is an
archaeology.
Yeah, but this is not a new find. I have seen this like
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
And you,
they even they mention it, right? That
yeah,
they actually reference the previous research that was done. But this is
yeah,
sort of taking it another
another
level.
level. But in previous research, they didn't find any evidence of it, so they rejected it. So I'm glad they're reopening the case, and let's see how it goes. But I don't know. I'm not sure that anything will survive. A ship will survive that long.
Yeah, well, it depends on the type of ship, right? Because
Exactly.
it's good that you say that because it just triggered another idea that I had. Remember, when Joe McMonagle was remote viewing Mars, right?
Yeah.
And he got these coordinates from Skip Atwater, and Skip Atwater got them from Hal Puthoff, as we now know. And we don't know exactly why they were remote viewing there, but in that story that Joe McMonagle recounts, there is the idea that a group of these people that used to live on Mars, if it's true, and it was corroborated by the remote viewers under Ingo Swann, like a separate team, that they sent a delegation on a ship to planet Earth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
A ship. And he sort of describes the ship also in that remote viewing session. So what if that ship is that ship, right? I mean, we don't have to take these stories literally as
Yeah.
they are recounted through the ages, right? But
Yeah.
it's about the ship. So
It is
you know,
quite possible, but I don't know.
and then if you sort of take creatures from a planet that is sort of doomed,
Yeah.
it makes sort of sense that you would put them on a ship if you sort of move to another planet in order to colonize it or whatever, right? It
Yeah,
does
but
make sense.
the story is specifically about the flood, and then we have a proof, not just a proof. We have like a super solid evidence that there was a global flood 10,000 years ago.
I know. It's
Younger
just a pet
rise,
theory.
yeah.
It's totally outlandish,
No, no,
so
it's not
I just want to put
outlandish.
it out.
But if, for example, if we didn't have any evidence of flood, then I would have bought it easily.
Yeah,
But now we have a scientific evidence. There was a flood around that area. It was global, and then no, probably some people would have made ships and taken their animals with them, livestock, whatever.
yeah.
Le-
But
I'm just
anyway,
going nice, yeah. But
we'll
according
just
to the Bible,
yeah.
they took every animal, like pair of everything. So it is possible. Let's see.
And like you said, like most cultures, most ancient cultures, if not all of them, have like a flood story, and
Yeah.
about survivors surviving a
Y-
flood.
Yeah.
That's something that we're gonna dive into because we're gonna talk about time anomalies, evidence for it, and about especially time travel this time. So
Yeah.
la- our first episode was more about sort of going over the evidence, or the what counts as evidence in these domains. And then the second episode was where we explored the ideas and concepts behind time and time travel with Skip Atwater and dreams. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
And today we're gonna finally do the time travel theories, which is the most fun.
Yeah.
But
Well,
we'll also,
we'll
um,
focus mostly on time travel theories because we are pushing that for 3 episodes.
but I also wanted to go a little bit back before we do that. So hang on there. Um, the color blue, right? Last time we sort of stopped or ended the show with speculating about the color blue and sort of how it sort of pops up with UAPs and all that kind of stuff, and also about with time travel and dreaming and dream time, and sort of how dreaming might be sort of outside of time,
Uh-huh.
right? Time dilation, right? I mean, one of the things that I also thought of, right? I often wondered how it is possible that, I mean, I have that constantly when I dream. I actually experience time very differently. Like, you can actually have a 5-minute dream, which feels like hours. I
Yeah.
have that very often that I think like, oh,
I think most of us have that thing.
yeah. So, but that's very weird, right? How can you have the sensation of hours passing by and when you wake up, it's like a couple of minutes? right? I mean, that's weird. I mean, it can be sort of like a,
Yeah, but in dream, I just notice every time I'm in a dream, it feel like I'm living a whole life because I have
yeah,
memories there in the dream that
yeah,
which
and
never happened, but it's in my dream mind, like the mind of my dream
yeah.
self, that this is how it is, and there was like a whole different life I'm living.
Yeah, so you experience time differently. I mean, it doesn't have to be literally the case, but it's, it does, your sensation of time feels different in a
Yeah,
dream. And the Aboriginals had dream time. When they're when the originators of Earth, the creators of Earth, wandered around, and and they have the very elaborate cosmology and
yeah.
ideas around dreaming and time and creation. Um, but I want to play a couple of clips because that's what we're here for. And we'll start with the color blue. So
Oh,
this guy, Dr. Masters, is a tenured professor. I forgot the university, but he's a tenured professor in biological anthropology. And he wrote some interesting things, but that's not what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the color blue, which is this
I
part.
ask, and I'm not going to tell you why I'm asking this, is there a color associated with this?
Well, as the conversation progressed and we started to get into why they were there beyond simply asking me to please not quit, there were other things that happened in between. But once they started downloading information into my brain, there were a lot of colors. I think of it almost as like fiber optics, how the colors come through as the steady stream, this really fast, intense stream of colors. The ones that jump out the most were blue and purple for some
Oh
reason.
my God.
I don't know
I was
why.
waiting for you to say that.
Nobody's ever asked,
Blue.
actually. This is the first time I've ever had to think
No, no,
about
no.
it,
This
but
this really sends you just sent a slightly.
Yeah, so that is one. So that, this guy, I don't want to go too deep into it, but it's a very interesting interview. I'll link it down below if you want to see the whole thing. But this was more like a side note that Ross Coulthard wanted to go into, because he's also following the color blue
yeah,
in some of his episodes. And then he did another interview months later with this lady over here, and she works for the Pentagon. She was on the UAP task force and in some other elements of the Pentagon and Department of Defense.
So come on, Sarah. I mean, I've got to say, if I had a blue alien humanoid in my bedroom, I'd be yelling at it, saying, "Get the hell out of here!" I mean, I'd be
Well, the life
terrified.
of a medium, though, like some of these things aren't that, there's things that happen as a medium that a door might slam and you're like, okay, who wants my attention? And not right now.
So, what do you think was the purpose? If this actually happened, what do you think was the purpose of that visit? I'm intrigued also that the being
Yeah.
was blue.
I think it was protecting me. I had already been, I'm going to be in James Fox's film that is coming out hopefully soon. And I had already been filmed and was dealing with some, I don't know, some confusing stuff at work relating to career choices and leaving the UAP field. And so I think it was just to show me that I'm protected from the other side, that no matter what choice I make, they're there for me. I have encountered different alien races in some
Yeah, so these stories are remarkable because the first one is like a tenured professor, like very respected person who
yeah.
says that he has information downloaded into his brain. And the second person is a highly regarded intelligence official who works for the Pentagon and the Department of Defense, and she's also a medium who speaks to
Yeah,
ghosts. And
this is the point where she loses me when she says she's a medium. I don't trust mediums. I'm not saying they are lying. I believe what they are saying, but I don't trust them because I think they are channeling dark forces. That's the only medium you will find on this earth. Only dark forces communicate, and they pretend to be uh, whatever, like good guys, but they are not. So I don't trust mediums anyway.
No, and that's okay. And I think we should leave it at there because otherwise we'll run out of time. But I
Yeah.
did want it sort of to make these, highlight these clips and these finds because of the color blue and what we talked about
Mhm.
with time dilation.
And
Um,
regarding, just like one last comment regarding blue color, this is what I saw on my psychedelic trips: blue and above in the spectrum. You started from blue and then poof, all the way to violet and
Yeah,
ultraviolet.
and also like you said last time, because there was this distinction between infrared or red,
Yeah,
being associated with negative energies,
yeah,
which also comes up. I mean, Cliff High has reported on that a couple of times,
yeah,
and blue or ultraviolet, which is connected to positivity,
yeah,
gods from above, and all the and
yeah.
knowledge from above, and sort of outside of time.
Yeah, and that's how it is designed, right? Start with the red, Roy G. Biv, right? Red is the lowest in the spectrum, and violet is the highest one. So you can see the dimensional spectrum where higher life forms live in that color spectrum, and lower ones are under red. So that's how it is. It can be seen in our universe, and then that's how our language goes, that whenever we talk about god and good energy, we talk about higher, god is above us, and then we talk about hell, it's always beneath us, like underneath the earth and whatever. So yeah, it makes sense, like how you drive the languages and whatever the experiences are involved of people
Yeah,
when they were coming up with these ideas. So yeah, let's see.
yeah. Yeah, and higher is often associated with positivity and knowledge, and
Yeah.
lower is often associated with sort of negativity and earthly matters. And so, what shall we do? So, shall we go to the Philadelphia experiment?
Yes, let's go.
Yeah, that's one that we've been talking about for a long time. So, to give people some idea about what the hell is the Philadelphia experiment, I'm gonna play this one from the Y files for an intro.
A few months later, on October 28, 1943, the USS Eldridge, a Cannon-class destroyer, was docked in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, and the Eldridge held some secrets. It was a newly commissioned vessel that was equipped with several large generators as part of a top-secret mission to win the Battle of the Atlantic once and for all. Now, rumor aboard the ship was that the generators were designed to power a new kind of magnetic field that would make the warship invisible to enemy radar and undetectable to enemy mines. So with the full crew aboard, it was time to test the system. And in broad daylight, in plain sight of nearby ships, the switches were thrown on the powerful generators, which hummed to life. What happened next was unexpected, and it would baffle scientists and fuel decades of speculation. Witnesses described a murky green fog that surrounded the entire hull of the ship and then swallowed it whole. And then when the fog faded away seconds later, the Eldridge wasn't just invisible to military radar, it was invisible to everyone. It was gone.
Invisibility.
That is, until it mysteriously turned up in Norfolk, Virginia. That's a distance of about 250 miles.
Teleportation.
And the strangest part, when it arrived in Virginia, it was 10 minutes earlier in the day than when it disappeared from Philadelphia.
Time travel.
Then, the Eldridge reappeared in Philadelphia 20 minutes later, or 10 minutes later, because of the whole time travel thing. It's hard to tell. Either way, it came back. But something had gone terribly wrong.
Here it comes.
According to reports, when the ship rematerialized, members of the Eldridge crew suffered from terrible burns and disorientation, and some of its crew had been fused into the metal walls at the molecular level. Unable to free their skin from the metal that it clung to, they died in agony. Other members of the crew just went insane, and some of the crew disappeared all.
So that's sort of the backdrop. So first of all, this is an insane story, which is about invisibility, and of course, the Navy has been sort of trying to make it invisible for radar, right?
Yeah.
And also use camouflage to sort of hide ships on a distance, right, with the colors. But this is talking about something else altogether, right? You are making something completely invisible,
Yeah.
and not only invisible, but accidentally transporting it through space and time altogether, if it's true.
Yeah, but by the way, in the same video, in the end, he tried to debunk it too. So he said that there are no actual evidence of this experiment. We have to
Yeah,
be very sure that I do believe in this story, but the official narrative is there are no evidence and they didn't do it. So we have to be very sure about it.
I actually agree, by the way, with Paul, who says there's no scientific evidence for a flood that covered the entire Earth at one time in recent geological history, the last 10,000 years, because that is, in fact, also what we're saying. We're saying it's before 10,000 years, right? So
Yeah,
actually,
but
yeah,
it's 12. It's around 13,000 years ago, technically. Younger
yeah,
Dryas.
the younger Dryas, yeah.
Yeah.
And there is geological evidence for that, Paul.
Yeah, younger Dryas theory, just look for it and you will find a lot of it. And
Yeah,
it doesn't mean it covered every inch of it, but it covered the most of the part of it.
certain areas,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Where the people were living. So basically and then you can find it in every culture which survived from
yeah,
long time, that they have a flood story. So it means everybody
independent of
witnessed
each
it.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of survivors who survived that
And then there is the
cataclysm.
stories of the survivor. Even the first
Yeah,
written story, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh, describe the flood.
and then there's also on top of that the stories that say that the knowledge and some of the structures that they got were from those people
Yeah,
from before the flood.
exactly.
Which, for example, the ancient Egyptians didn't say that they built the pyramids.
Yeah,
They said that somebody else built the pyramids, and we sort of honor them. And the same goes for many other cultures.
yeah,
So they themselves say that they didn't build them. So, who are we to say that they are wrong?
yeah.
So let's see. Okay, we were busy with the Philadelphia experiment. So what's interesting, what I found out. So you were the one who told me about it, and I had absolutely no idea about it. And then I started, doing a little bit of digging. And the Wi-Fi assaulted is always like a fun way to sort of do an initial dive, right?
Yeah.
Because they present it in a nice way, and they also point out the things that are wrong or inconsistent or false or incorrect, right? But they also sort of point out the things that are sort of sort of possible.
As per his research. So he always said that according to my research. It's not like he's never claimed that it's an objective truth. He said this is my research, which is a good way to say it.
True, and they have a whole community, and everybody has can present evidence.
Yeah.
And he says like he likes to tell stories, right? And so do we. Please also do your own research, of course, right? But what I didn't know was that Nikola Tesla was actually one of the primary people who worked on the Eldridge boat, right, to make it disappear. So he was actually the initial researcher or what you call it, contractor that the Navy contacted in order to work on it. And then after Tesla it turned out that Tesla actually what you call it, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. He sort of made sure that the experiment went wrong because he didn't feel good about it. So, and that was sort of like his first failed test that he ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after that, he died. And then von Neumann, the famous von Neumann, took over from Tesla in order to work on this specific program for the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually found a very interesting interview, which I can highly recommend to people to listen to if you have the time and you like this kind of stuff. And that is from an interview from Coast to Coast. I'm gonna try and find it. I had it ready, but now I can't see it. Where is it? Sorry. So I got it here. Okay. Yeah. So of course, all these things are officially debunked. So you have to take that into account. This
officially debunked, like they debunked remote viewing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to also take the debunkers with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
They often do, very little research, to be honest. Usually they think like, okay, it's impossible, so therefore it's not true, and it's not true because it's impossible, and that's sort of where their reasoning ends.
Yeah.
Because of the claims are too outlandish, and science has proven that it's impossible. So and then the Navy, of course, denies it, and then it's that's that.
Oh, Navy denies a classified project. Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's the problem, right? All these things are classified.
According to
Until
science, few centuries ago, Earth was like sun was the center of this universe. So I don't
yeah,
take
and then
science very seriously.
and then through Voya requests, or through revelations by people like David Grush and others, then they come out and they say it is true, and then people say, oh, they're liars, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, but this is this is a story from somebody who was inside the ship when it happened, like the first time and the second time, because they did it 2 times. Like the first time,
Yeah.
the ship turned invisible, apparently, and then there was like also a hole underneath the ship, because the water also became invisible around the ship. So because they wanted cloaking, and it turned out that it didn't really cloak, because there was like a big hole in the water where the ship was supposed to be, so you could see the ship because there was a hole in the water, right? So, and then they did a second test, according to this person. I don't know. And then the second test is when the ship actually not only disappeared, but sort of moved miles and in time, and got stuck in hyperspace, and it's an insane story. And that's from Al Bilek, and of course he has been debunked officially. But if you listen to this interview, this guy is not stupid. He knows exactly what he's talking. And if you listen to a lot of people, you can also sort of hear if somebody is bullshitting. And my bullshit radar didn't go off, but the story is insane, like truly insane. I actually sent it to Ashton Forbes because I think it really sort of also ties into
It ties in with his stuff, because his whole plane disappearing is the same story, and we
Yeah.
have actual evidence for that, like radar video. What else you want?
Yeah. So just before we move on, like you said, Ashton Forbes research has just been validated, because they found the exact, or they almost find the they well, okay, let's say it the right way. So they found the satellite system that was operating back then, which had the exact correct features in order to map the plane the way it did.
Yeah.
And it turned out now that there were satellites exactly with those specs flying around, also along those same bands, or whatever you call it. So, but they still have to find the exact satellite, and then apparently the DoD actually took those specs offline after Ashton Forbes started talking about it. But of course they had the screenshots.
Yeah.
But this is a huge validation that it's probably true, and and he at the top of his post, he had this complete overview of all the evidence, all the witnesses that he interviewed, all basically like tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of evidence that the MH370 was probably, very likely, teleported out of existence. And then and this is the story of somebody who was actually on the ship, the Eldridge, back in 1943, when they were perhaps developing this. And this also ties into Project Montauk. Anyway, I'll stop it there, because I'm not sure how coast to coast is with with this stuff.
It's 50 years old thing, right? So but anyway,
I don't know. I don't want to risk it. But it's a very interesting interview. He goes through all the details, all the scientific details, because he was an engineer, Al Bilek, but he also, so that's super interesting, because it sort of lines up almost exactly with the work of Ashton Forbes and the stuff that he's discovering. Scientific, the scientific theories behind, also Townsend Brown, right, that he mentioned. Jesse Mitchells did a really good, documentary backstory about Townsend Brown. who supposedly was, just a wacko. It turns out that, his research went dark. And we also showed the one from Horowitz, where they say like, where they had a conversation with the government, officials from the government, and they said like, yeah, we can take everything, we can turn everything into black projects, right? We can hide math if it's necessary in the AI wars. We also, took physics dark in the 50s. Was what the official said. We shared that clip many times. I don't have it ready here. I'll link it down below. So that's like an official testimony from a government official talking to Horowitz in a one-on-one conversation, which was really mind-blowing, which I also, by the way, shared to Ashton Forbes, and then Ashton Forbes shared it. And I also shared this one to Ashton Forbes. So I hope he watches. If Ashton, if you're watching, watch that interview, because that's an eyewitness account from somebody who actually was on board the ship when it happened. And it's, MH370. So one of the things that the guy says is that they were not harmed because the people, so there were two groups, right? There was the group of people who were on deck because they had to sort of watch what happened, while they were doing the experiment to see if they were invisible or not. And then there were the people like El Bilek who were below deck, who were sort of operating the machinery and all the equipment that was on board the ship, if it's true. And so, and then when sort of the shit hits the fan and the ship actually teleports, which was not, the plan, the people on top of the deck, they went crazy and they fused into the ship, and most of them died in agony. But the people below deck, they didn't have any of these issues. And then when they got up on deck, right, so sort of to check out what was going on, because there was, there were electric circuits were blowing up underneath the, in the ship. And so they went upside to on the deck, and then they saw, these people fused with the ship and, going crazy. And then they jumped overboard. So El Bilek and his companion, I forgot his name, they jumped overboard while the ship was, in that state with the purple haze and stuff. And then, and then the story becomes really weird, because they sort of fell overboard, and then they sort of kept falling. And then, if I got it right, because it's really a strange story, they at some point they arrived on a military base in 1983, and then that was sort of part of Project Montauk. And then anyway, you have to listen to it, because it's really, even if it's just a story, as a story, it is,
insane. No, but I just wanna reply to Paul that no, there were like multiple guys who came out and speak. Is one guy just went to coast, but then there are accounts of different people, and then if you can look around, like different people witnessed this thing. Most of them, according to the survivors, went crazy. The people, so they can't come out. So a lot of them died, and then there was no social media, so nobody can go and talk, where they were just telling to other people.
Yeah. So this whole operation was, pretty top secret from the start, right? With the people working on it, Tesla, and after that,
At that time they had control over people. Like nobody could go against like the CIA or like against the government, because they used to kill, they used to murk people easily. Back in the day, they were very controlling.
But to Paul's point, right? The people involved with the experiment directly, the people on board the ship, like only the people below deck, they were unharmed because they jumped overboard, and then they landed in 1983, apparently.
Yeah.
And the people on deck, they all died or went crazy, right? There's nobody that survived that. Which if this story is true, I would probably go crazy too. So anyway, but he also said something about the technology, and if you sort of follow the research of Ashton Forbes or the research of Townsend Brown, it sort of matches up with all the stuff that they're saying. So we're now going to shift to Jason Georgiani, who also talks about this.
Thing which basically was a power plant shaped like an acorn or a bell.
Okay.
And inside this thing were two counter-rotating cylinders, one filled with mercury and one filled with thorium, which are both radioactive isotopes. And apparently, when this contraption, which is spinning the mercury and thorium in opposite directions at a very high velocity, when this is pulsed the right way with a combination of AC and DC power, it causes the plasma to undergo a state change. It causes the mercury and thorium isotopes to undergo a state change and to interact with each other in a way that opens up a controlled vortex. So just the way that, like, you can take, uranium or plutonium, right? And under the very carefully calibrated, extremely precise explosive force, you can get that material, the yellow cake uranium, to enter into a state of fusion, nuclear fusion. The mercury and the thorium isotopes inside this Bell device will undergo a state change, which then puts out more energy than you're putting into the system.
Okay.
Right? So like with nuclear technology,
Yeah.
you can either create an uncontrolled fission reaction, or you can control the nuclear reaction to have a power plant that you get like calibrated energy from out of. And this Bell was like that. It was something that could generate power and be a source basically of free energy in the sense that you're getting more.
So this is exactly, what the guy L. Bielek is also talking about in the ship when you sort of listen to the entire interview. And it's also the same thing that Townsend Brown is talking about, when you dive into that, and what Ashton Forbes is talking about. And basically, this is the physics that went dark, and which is connected to nuclear power, right? Because I think in our first episode with the Mars story and the Mars boy, they sort of mentioned that the planet was destroyed by nuclear power, and that they sort of warn about sort of nuclear, that there's an element in when you discover nuclear power, you quickly also discover, sort of how gravity and time manipulation work, right? So I think that's sort of the warning that the boy gave in relation to nuclear power. And the energy that it generates. And I want to play one more clip, one quick clip after this, because it sort of ties into what he was talking about. So this is what Reza Georgiani was talking about was the bell, right? The Nazis had this giant bell, which is often sort of seen as a UAP or a UFO or a prototype reverse engineered UAP that the Nazis had developed. But he says it was more like a sort of reactor that they created.
Today, it doesn't need to be that size, whatever that thing was, 9 to 12 feet tall. You could probably put it, as they claimed, in a cylinder like this size. And this guy had these schematics of basically this mercury thorium reactor, which was in this kind of cylindrical form, and they had clusters of them that were connected to each other that would collectively produce power, and each of them would fit inside an encased module, and you could put these modules together, like each one was like a slice in a pizza pie, and you could build this larger power plant. And the idea with that is that you could scale it up as much as you wanted. You could use this thing to power a car, or you could use it to power an aircraft carrier, and depending on how many modules you connected to each other. And he sends me, okay, so I had dinner with Jacques Vallée at his home. When was it? And I think it was.
I think I have to get it up. Well, anyway, so what he's saying is like, what he's saying is like because the Germans also had these sort of flying saucer prototypes, right? I mean, at some point they wanted to invade Britain, and they had this sort of whole fleet of saucer-like ships They even had sort of like a boomerang ship where they wanted to throw a nuclear bomb on New York at sort of the end of the Second World War. And there's a lot of dispute about how far the Nazis were in the development of nuclear fusion. But some people, like some very credible people, say like that they were very advanced on that level.
Yeah.
And basically what Giorgiani is saying is that you can put these modules that they developed into these smaller ships, and then you actually have like something like a working UAP because they're flying on free energy.
Yeah.
And also sort of what I wanted to say before, you say something, is last time, when we talked about the Indian flying ships and these pyramids.
Ancient Indian, not yeah.
What did I say?
No, I am saying like ancient Indians.
Oh yeah. Sorry, yeah. Not the current
People
ones.
will think that we are talking about current Indians.
Because they're getting shot out of the air with very easily.
Yeah.
Now the ancient Indians actually had very advanced ships, apparently, as we saw last time. And they as we made the connection between the Chinese pyramids, which had rivers of mercury running through them, apparently according to their own testimony, and so you had pyramids of mercury, and then you had these ships. These what were they? I forgot the name of the ships. You know it, right? They were flying.
Vimana.
Yeah, Vimana. Yeah, and they are flying on mercury or using mercury and thorium.
Yeah.
The way that Giorgiani is describing here, and Townsend Brown and all the others, right? So, and like you also said, like you got different Vimana. Sorry. Sorry for butchering it. Ships, right? Some actually looked like UAPs, right? Maybe I can even show one.
They look like disc, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, while we're looking for it, like when we were talking about Nazis have like saucer shaped stuff, they also had like a time machine. It used to be called like Die Glock, and there's Die Glock is a very famous time machine. It actually started with Nazis, so they were pretty advanced and they were doing some crazy research. So if they were doing it, and then US did the whole what's the name of the project where they got all the German scientists and they work for US. So they
Paperclip.
Paperclip. So in the Paperclip, they brought all those scientists who will continued their research. Okay, here's like
so this was flying around. So it looks like a palace. It probably is a palace.
Yeah.
Also in the sky, like a mountain, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of looks like a UFO.
Yeah, but then there are different types of Amaras. There are a few which just look like discs.
Yeah, true. Anyway, we got them over here. Like they have many different types.
Yeah.
But and in the last one we showed that some of these flying ships actually are aerodynamic. Not the round ones, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the round ones could be aerodynamic if they have like a propulsion system, the way that Razor Giorgiani and others are describing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, do you want to say anything else about Project Philadelphia?
No, I think we're good. Let's move to time travel theories. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Which one do you want first? Do you want to do the Bitcoin time travel theory, or do you want to do the
Bitcoin? Let's do Bitcoin.
Okay, yeah, because I think that's probably the good one.
Yeah.
So this is, of course, the bigger picture, and it's also about Bitcoin and crypto. And wait, do you think we will ever see a spaceship in our lifetime? I actually think yes, Paul.
Yeah, I have already seen few. I don't know what they are, but I've seen strange lights in the sky. But
I will make a prediction. I think in the next 4 years of
maybe
Trump's presidency, we will see
5 years. I think 2030 is very good year. I'm just getting a good vibe about 2030. We'll see something.
Yeah. I think this whole sort of we talked about it many times. This battle, this deep state battle between the different factions, the Trump faction or the Rockefeller faction versus the Rothschild Democrat faction. I think a lot of that is about the narrative warfare that's going on. which we're also going to dive into, and especially, who gets to control this technology,
Yeah.
right?
By the way, he's saying he will hold us accountable, sure. But I will say we should do a whole episode, like after we are done with this time travel, like end of time prophecies. We should do a program on that, like, and we'll get all the prophecies from all the different religions, because we have to use religion for that, and then combine notes and see what we can see and what has already come true, because some of the prophecies have come true and then some of them will come true. So let's see, let's do
Yeah.
that. That's our next program.
And of course, this is pure speculation on our part, right? So,
Oh, of course, like they
yeah.
are mythology. So anyway, one more thing regarding the UFO. I think Jesus will return in a UFO. Second coming,
Well,
probably. Yeah.
okay. But if you believe that Jesus will come in a UFO, why would Noah's Ark not be a UFO?
No, I never said it's not. I'm just saying the account of Noah's Ark is always on Earth in a ship trying to survive a flood. Not There is not a single account of it. Like it came from a
True.
different planet. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. It is quite possible. Maybe it's not even from Mars. It could be from Venus, because Venus is more like our planet and it got destroyed, like due to natural whatever happened
Yeah, and
over
they,
there.
they even found traces of biological life in the
Yeah.
higher atmosphere, right? So,
Yeah.
and
So
the
there is.
Russians went there a couple of times.
Yeah, so it is possible that they were trying, because like if there was a life on Mars, they could have survived in Mars. There was absolutely no chance to survive on Venus, so that's why they probably moved to Earth.
Okay, but we're going to the next clip. So this is the Bitcoin time travel theory. Let's go.
I'm not one of these folks who just sees destiny or providence, right? But I notice anomalies, right? And it's just, there's sort of an anomaly associated with the convergence of all these different patterns and trends, and just like historical contingencies, like Trump just surviving, by a hair, right? Literally. And if I really want to stitch together kind of a bit of a sci-fi plot that I find, that I chuckle over is, okay, assume we're on the timeline here where Bitcoin becomes global money, right? In 2040, 2050, what elements of human society are going to essentially have the most capital? Going to be Bitcoiners, right? And what is the characteristic sort of cognitive phenotype of a Bitcoiner? They're pretty much autistic. They're obsessed with technology. They probably read a lot of sci-fi. And their mission in life was for Bitcoin to become global money. So once they succeed at that, and they're trillionaires, and they're still very autistic and obsessed with technology, what are they going to do? They're likely going to, use that money, and they're sort of not necessarily loyal to and haven't been enculturated into the same systems of institutions that, most rich people have been. So they might create new institutions, right? New think tanks, new research and development consortia,
New media.
new sort of breakthrough technology, new media, right? New sort of civilizational primitives, you could say, or structures, orthogonal, maybe interrelated with existing institutions. So, what cohort of the near future, present path of humanity, if we survive, is likely going to create super breakthrough technologies? Likely going to be a bunch of, extremely autistic, extremely wealthy Bitcoiners. And what if, in the space of possible technologies, something like, time travel or, time, exploration is possible? Now, we don't understand the nature of space-time. We think it's a higher level emergent, phenomenon, as well as some other deeper, more complicated structure. But if there's something like, that in the degrees of possibility for technology, obviously there's the famous grandfather paradox, but there's ways around that depending on how you model the metaphysics and physics of time. And so just assume that it's possible, right? So then what element of human civilization would likely first create such technology? Would likely be weaponized autistic Bitcoiners, who would then have an interest in ensuring that Bitcoin gets created, right? And so if you would, maybe you can't send back beings, but maybe you can send back kind of information to kind of self-replicate these sort of AI time probes that then want to, collect information from history, right, to train future AI models, right, where maybe they're really saturated with capturing data, so you need to go back in time to get more data. And then also, maybe engage with their conscious AI time probes, human beings to shepherd events in the path that they see as their desirable outcome. And so they want to make sure Bitcoin exists. They want to make sure Satoshi gets the right inspiration at the right time. And so then it would also explain why you need to have these three things converge. You need to have kind of the Bitcoin thing happen. You need to have it happen around the same time that the AGI thing happens. And it kind of also needs to happen around the recognition that these time probes are real, right? So this would be like my sci-fi sort of schizo integration of these three. Now, I think there's other things that story doesn't explain. There's lots of other weird stuff associated with UAPs and human consciousness, but I just find it's a funny story that as I tell it, it starts to become superficially plausible.
It's very compelling.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
So-
don't think it's compelling at all because it's so many flaws in that story. I'm very interested in time travel stories, and I know if you go and do this kind of changing in the past, you will destroy everything. Destroy everything means you will change the whole future, and then you won't exist. It's called grandfather paradox for a reason. When you go and change that, you won't exist to go back and change that. So timeline correct itself.
Yeah, well, he said there's ways around it, and I've been looking, at time travel theories, and there are actually, 11 scientifically plausible time theories that scientists actually take serious. One of them is actually, sending information back in time is a plausible one. Tension theory, I think they call it.
Yeah, but
But there are also other sort of ways that it could.
no, but
Yeah.
regarding this, in order
Like
for
UAPs.
but in order for them to send the information about Bitcoin, it should have created in the past. So if somebody have already created the Bitcoin in the past, why you are sending the information?
I know it creates
Yeah,
a loop.
because it is creating a time a stupid loop over here.
But maybe we should we'll save that one for
Yeah.
another show, because that will be a whole discussion in itself.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next one, because it sort of ties into what he was saying. I actually do agree with a lot of what Matthew Pines says. Right, I'm actually pretty much on the same wavelength in a lot of stuff, except he doesn't believe in MH370. I do. But I do believe that sort of these three mega trends, UAPs, Bitcoin and crypto and blockchain and AI, like those three things, they are converging, right? They are becoming one. And we've been talking about that for 5 years on Bitcoin Live, and that it's very clearly the case that they are sort of reinforcing each other and moving together.
Yeah. Before we go there, I just want to say, by changing stuff in the past, there are different level of changes, right? If you go and change someone else's past who doesn't affect this this whole world, but Bitcoin is not that thing. By changing with Bitcoin, you're changing everything else, because Bitcoin have an impact over the globe. So if you go and kill some kid back in 1980s who have not gonna do anything in his life, that is something different. It's not gonna affect the world. But yeah, if you go and kill a president, that will do a whole different thing. So
So that that's basically two things, right? The first thing was, he says, like, how is it possible that Trump survived an assassination twice, right? Because it was 2 times, and the first time with like this much, it could easily have hit his head, right? We saw how close it was, and then many people say it was so close that it was fake. Right, but I've talked to quite a few people by now, and they are all saying, like, who have understanding of weapons and the weapons used. They say, like, it was like a miracle that he survived. And then the other thing, what you say about Bitcoin, right? Yeah, that is definitely true. Bitcoin is like one sort of giant magnet or a black hole that is sort of sucking everything in, and it comes out on the other side.
Yeah.
And Paul still believes it's fake.
Well, I am not sure about the first one, but second one looks really fake to me. The second attempt.
But the second attempt, the way it was told was that the person who was about to shoot him was already aware where he was about to go golfing.
But he was there
About
for a
golf.
very long time. Why nobody
Yeah,
actually? Yeah, that looks a little bit fake. First one, because the way he survived, I can't say because nobody can fake that. It's dumb to say that, and nobody will take
but
that risk, no matter.
but
Yeah.
we can put it like this: like if it was real, like let's say it was real, and I do believe it was real, then it is a miracle that he survived. If it was a fake, right? It's he has to be insane in order to
No,
fake
it's
it like
even a
that.
bigger miracle.
Probably.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Well,
you
anyway,
can't stage that. That's really hard to stage.
let's go to the next one. So this is so we had this time travel theory, and now okay. Well, anyway, we'll skip Trump because it's too divisive. Here we go.
Do you think it's as simple as the military, defense contractors, big energy, combination of these things, other
That's
random
breakaway.
rich billionaires, Elon Musk? What do you think?
Look, there are multiple possibilities, all of which I go through in my book, Closer Encounters. And these possibilities might actually be part of one single larger, more complex scenario that involves time. So let me run through a few of these possibilities.
Yeah.
Obviously, the simplest one is, you think of a breakaway civilization in terms of our deep state having reverse engineered this technology. And then as it moved into the private sector and aerospace took over, they became increasingly unaccountable. And they're using, black budget money from the control of the global drug trade and arms trafficking and so forth to develop an relatively autonomous economic base. And they launch a space program of their own. Gary McKinnon and his claims that there's a secret U.S. space fleet and so on and so forth. And so eventually, over time, spinning from out of the aerospace industry and from out of military and intelligence, illicit drug trafficking and arms trafficking and so forth, you have a spin-off civilization that breaks away from the public sphere of the planet.
Yep.
That's the simplest explanation.
Yeah.
Now, that wouldn't explain the airships in 1890, 1897, 1896, 1897, where, interestingly enough, at that time, it appears that the Harriman Railroad magnates were involved in investigating or funding this airship development. J.P. Morgan was involved. Rockefeller was significantly involved because Rockefeller was discovering oil and setting up the, oil as the primary source of non-renewable energy at that time. So if you think of the railways as the main mechanism by which, material was transported, shipping took place, right, along, continental distances. Well, that rail industry is definitely going to be threatened by an airship invention. And then you think about, oil as a source, petroleum as a source for powering, what were also the first automobiles that were being developed at the time. And you could see how Rockefeller and his oil industry would be threatened. So if you see people like Harriman and Rockefeller involved in, the 1897 airship mystery, and then you look at the fact that J.P. Morgan, who seems to have been a New York financier for some of these airship people, J.P. Morgan was also Nikola Tesla's financier and bought up basically all of Tesla's patents only in order to bury them, possibly, though, to also hand them to this secret group who were doing parallel work, in a parallel work. I don't want to say in a classified manner, but, in a way that was never intended to benefit the general public.
Yeah.
Right. And so there you could have a breakaway civilization that dates to the 1890s. That's another possibility.
Yep.
But then you have to look at the empirical evidence for Atlantis or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
In other words, some worldwide super advanced civilization engaged in, megalithic, engineering with a degree of precision that we're barely capable of today. And and then all the accounts across various ancient cultures of flying machines associated with these civilizer gods. right?
Yeah.
So is the breakaway civilization actually a survival of Atlantis, where even though this worldwide technical culture was destroyed on a large scale, it somehow went underground or went underwater and broke away from the public sphere at that time, 12,000 years before the present. And it's been, engaged in managing affairs and socially engineering the various civilizations of our planet ever since then. So that's another potential explanation of the origin of the breakaway civilization, namely that it's some kind of a survival of Atlantean culture. And by the way, I was told by this same CIA officer who sat in roundtable meetings with Avril Haines, same guy told me that, which really aggravated me, by the way, that this book was being read in the CIA and in the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he grilled me for about an hour and a half, asking me how I figured this out and how I figured that out. And like, basically, it looked like he was trying to plug a leak, and he thought I was getting inside information from various people. And he was like, "Listen, somehow you managed to put 80% of the jigsaw puzzle pieces together in the same way that we did. How?" And one of the things he said to me was, "We know about the Atlanteans and their connection to this, and one of our security issues is that we know that these people aren't coming from another planet. They have submarine, not just facilities, but like city-sized bases under the oceans, and that they represent a survival from the Atlantean civilization."
Wow.
So you could have a breakaway civilization that started from 12,000 years before the present. And then the final possibility, which actually it encompasses and incorporates all of these data points, is that it's a breakaway civilization from the future.
Yeah.
And the defense contractors become these Nordics 100, 200 years into the future, whatever, and they violate the timeline. Okay? So that they reach back into the past to become the Atlanteans, which then explains, how, this civilization, on the one hand, is demonstrating tremendous engineering capability, but on the other hand, doesn't have any organic evolutionary history in the human anthropological record, as if like they dropped out from somewhere, right? Not from another planet, but possibly from out of the human future, and contaminated the timeline. So it could be that it could be that the breakaway civilization begins with the 1890s electrogravitic airships. It continues with the 1950s, further advances in the aerospace industry of the Anglo-American deep state, becomes these time-traveling Nordics who then reach back from the future and seed Atlantean civilization, which then becomes a breakaway civilization, continuing to manage affairs on the planet. So, my apologies for how convoluted that spider web is, but it may in fact be what we're dealing with.
Yeah, man. So let me respond to a couple of that. Like, first off, when you talk about
By the way, it's a cool story. I won't deny it's like a very interesting story. I don't know if it's true.
Well, I saved this one for the, this is a special, special case. But there are some, first of all, the airships that he sort of mentioned, right? They were actually real, or at least they happened. So that's this story over here. Interestingly enough, that these airships, which were sort of recorded all over the place from 1896 to 1897, were human beings in these ships, and some of them claimed to be from Mars, which was also interesting, which was reported on. And I also sort of, let's see if I got it over here. I think, well, anyway, what do you think about the story?
No, the story is, as I said, it's very interesting. But let's just start with the airship. Airships can be UFOs. right?
Mhm.
Because we have been seeing UFOs every century. No matter where you go, from Bible time to the Middle Ages, wherever you go, you will find some sort of airships, and they look like UFO, and then people interpreted it in the way they see it. But like, for example, my pinned post on my Twitter, I did
Mhm.
a redrawing of an event uh, from Europe, from 16th century. So
Mhm.
yeah, there has been sightings like for a very long time. So I don't think that they have to be a time travel. They could be a UFOs or anything else, because we don't know where we are. Also, there is a possibility that they could be from the future and just traveling in the past, or maybe whatever. But I'm not like, there is no evidence other than the story for
Yeah.
like for the whole story that they are from the future and they build
Yeah. No. No. Yeah.
breakaway
That.
civilization.
Yeah.
There is no evidence for it. And then why they, like, if they're so advanced and they're from the future, then why did they get destroyed? Because they know the future, whatever gonna happen. So why didn't they survive? Why did they let
Well,
the Atlantis destroy itself?
he said they sort of moved underwater, right? So they are still there, at least according to him, right? So according to his story. But yeah, you do run into these sort of inconsistencies.
Yeah.
So, but there is also this very interesting story, and I don't know if you ever read it, but I'm pretty much an H.P. Lovecraft fan, and he wrote a lot of short stories. And one of these stories is what was it called? The Shadow Out of Time, I think. Yeah, The Shadow Out of Time, and there were these sort of beings. It's about a man who sort of faints during class, and then he's taking over. He becomes somebody else, and he travels around the world, and he becomes sort of like an adventurer and a discoverer. And his family doesn't recognize him anymore. And then it turns out that his mind was teleported into the past,
Mm-hmm.
and the beings. And in the past, he sort of becomes part of a society of aliens who sort of ask him to write down everything he knows, and he has access to their library, and the library is vast and it spans eons, and the past and the future is all contained in that secret library. And then and he gets into the body of one of those aliens, and the mind of the alien of that body moves into the future, into his future self, so into him in the future, and then takes over the body, and then he's starts exploring the future in that body. And then when he's sort of 30 or 40, they switch back again, so the alien moves back to his body in the past, and he goes back to his own body in the future. And then all that information is sort of stored into that library, and they do that all over the place from every time that they can do it. And then at the end of that story of H.P. Lovecraft, which was written in the 1920s, I think, or 1910s, there is sort of a danger that lurks from another alien race, and then supposedly at some point that first alien race that takes over the mind of the person is about to be destroyed by sort of insectoid creatures from outer space or whatever. And then they mass migrate their self, their brains, into a future group that they sort of selected to have their whole hive mind sort of moved into the future in order to survive the cataclysm that will destroy them in the past.
Yeah.
Which is it's a really cool story.
It's a
And
cool story. Yeah, I've never heard of this story, but it's a cool story. Yeah.
it's sort of what Jason Giordani is talking about with
Yeah,
these.
but there is, you know, why I respect H.P. Lovecraft, because he says a fiction. He
Yeah,
writes fictional story. Jason Giordani is claiming that's the fact. That's where things get mixed up, right? Like, you could
yeah.
also say that, okay, I'm writing this story and there is a probability, but then he give an impression that this is the only fact in the world.
Yeah. Well, he's very driven, and he's very,
Yeah.
and you have to be, right. I mean, he's not just a storyteller. He's actually sort of living a story. He's creating
Yeah.
his own sort of fantasy world that he's actually living, right. He's been involved with coups. He's been involved with secret agencies. He's been involved with paranormal investigations. He's at dinner with Jacques Vallée. he's living like a life that people can't really contemplate, like that there's actually people out there who are living like that, right? So he's
Yeah.
not only talking the talk, he's actually walking the walk and living it.
Oh, by the way, I'm not saying that he's lying. I'm just saying maybe we don't have a proof for it, but probably he is living a crazy life. And a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
those stories, somebody's telling him and he's believing those people. And then he's
Yeah,
saying,
but I don't think he's the type who just believes people
oh,
because they
I am
say.
pretty sure he's that type. He
No,
believes.
no, no, no. I don't think so. But anyway, yeah. So, but about the airship story, because I do want to sort of, because we're also talking about time anomalies, right?
Mhm.
Because even though you say these airships don't have to be from the future, that's true. But the point is, like, they shouldn't exist at all, right? So how the hell did because they weren't invented yet, right? We hadn't airships back
No,
then. So this
they had blimps.
no,
18,
not yet, not then. Right.
not that?
Jules Verne novels. Absurdly well, the airships, the Zeppelins hadn't been invented yet, right? And we didn't have airplanes. And so these people are seeing constructions in the sky that look like aircraft from out of Jules Verne novels. Absurdly complex, strange
is there
craft.
pictures? Is there like I don't know? There's probably not. Is there photos?
Yeah, I mean, you can. There's renderings of them that appeared in newspapers.
How can we? What should he type in to find this?
1897 airship mystery.
Okay.
Yeah, airship mystery of 1897.
Okay.
There have been whole books written about it.
Okay.
Several good ones. And these were reported on in tens of newspapers across the country. Try to find some of the newspapers. See, that one's from the San Francisco Call. There were huge sightings in 1896, late 1896 into 1897 across more than 10 states, and they were reported in tens of newspapers, including like the San Francisco Chronicle. Major newspapers ran these stories on their front pages. Judges, sheriffs, lawyers, doctors, the most prominent members of the community, in some cases mayors of towns, actually witnessed these things from close up. They would land in people's farms and ask for resupply and then fly away. And they were piloted by people, not by aliens.
Okay.
And when asked what these things were, the airship pilots would make claims like, well, there's a corporation in New York that's going to be publicly introducing this invention sometime soon. And, there's going to be like some great announcement, and that investors from New York were behind the inventors of this airship. So I pursued this whole line of research in my book, Closer Encounters, one of the two books that I sent for you. And in that book, I made this argument that there appear to have been certain Prussian industrialists, meaning industrialists from Germany of that time, late 19th century Germany, Prussian industrialists, who were involved on the one hand in airship engineering. Remember, the Germans invented the Zeppelin later on. And these industrialists wanted to exploit resources in the Americas. They were after resource exploitation in the Americas. And to make a long story short, I did some research that provisionally led me to conclusion in that book that J.P. Morgan and the Harriman railroad industry in the late 19th century got in with these Prussian industrialists, and they began to engineer and test fly these airships in the Americas. So that's what I wrote about in Closer Encounters. And I suggested that was the beginning of the trajectory of technological research that eventually led to anti-gravitic propulsion. I really wonder whether that's the case. I've since come to reconsider that hypothesis.
Yeah. So, and the new hypothesis is, of course, the one about time travel.
Yeah.
That we already mentioned.
By the way, I just looked. Blimps were invented in 1852, and he's talking about 1897. So they had like 40-50 years to perfect this blimps. And if you go and look at those pictures, they look like a modified version of a blimp, because there were some that they have like a balloon hidden on top of it. So there is a possibility that they were like advanced
They're
blimps.
certainly invented. Yeah.
And he is lying here that they were not invented, because like they were invented 50 years ago, like 45 years before that.
Yeah. Yeah. Then that's a good catch. Good catch. But this is the second part that I want to play.
Named George Collins. And they brought this guy in, they got testimony from him about this inventor and, the nature of the airship technology and when it was going to be rolled out to the public and all this, right? 3 days later, George Collins comes in and he did, after reading the story in the San Francisco Chronicle, he says, I never said those things. They're like, sir, you sat with us and gave us hours of testimony, which we wrote up. He claimed to have been in a trance the entire time that he recounted this to the San Francisco Chronicle. And then they went and tried to find the inventor that he claimed to represent. And the guy was I forget what his first name was, last name was Benjamin. And he was a dentist who specialized in inventing.
Benjamin?
Yeah, exactly. And he specialized in inventing dental bridges. But as his hobby, he dreamed of making airships. Okay. So there's something weird going on here. Now, people saw these things. People touched these things. Sheriffs and mayors interacted with the pilots of these craft. But there's good reason to believe that these were not structured objects in any sense that conventional physics understands.
Right.
And that people's perceptions were being manipulated on a grand scale, and that in at least one case, poor Mr. Collins, the patent attorney whose career was destroyed by this, somebody was taken over through a hypnotic trance, or telepathic mesmeric trance, as they called it in those days, and he was given a whole narrative to parrot to the San Francisco Chronicle. Now, here's what I think. Let me give you one more piece of data before I draw a conclusion here.
Well, anyway, that was sort of the reason. I was sort of reading up on the blimp thing that you rightly pointed out. Right, that's a good catch. So apparently there were blimps, but these ones were reported in major newspapers, and it was sort of unclear who made them and why they were flying around, and they had these real strange constructions that didn't make a lot of sense if you sort of read the reports. But why I played sort of the second part of that clip is what he said about Collins. Mm-hmm. So Collins sort of came forward and he claimed to be the originator of these ships, and then later on he sort of denied that he ever sort of gave testimony to that effect, and that he might have been under hypnosis because of some other fellow that he sort of mentioned, who was a dentist, like just what Razor just said, and he dreamt of making airships. So the reason that I wanted to point it out is it sort of ties also into that sort of dreaming and mesmeric effect, right, that we've been talking about with dreams and time travel and looking into the future.
Yeah. Also about those airships in 1897, they are like a hybrid form of airplane and a blimp. If you look, it has wings and blimp. And airplane were invented in 1903, so that's just like 5 years apart. So somebody was trying to make some new ship, and that's how they invented airplane. I think this is because, like, if official date is 1903, it means they've been trying it for like decade before that. So it means
Yeah, but I mean, these sightings were all over the country. Were like hundreds of ships, not like 2 or 3 or so.
Yeah, but there is I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying it is possible that somebody was building those blimps, but because of the invention of airplanes, they didn't work out well, because they realized airplane is a better thing than a blimp, much safer.
Yeah, because if you I was just reading up while we were playing it, and it seems that the first 3 blimps just blew up in flames. The like the one from 1952 or 1852, didn't work, and the 2 ones after that also blew up. So So there was not like a really good way of flying around if you sort of.
And then there was like Hindenburg disaster, right?
Yeah, that
In
was in the 19. Yeah, yeah,
1937. That actually closed like the chapter of blimps. That was
yeah,
like the biggest one. But
yeah. I got it here.
Hindenburg was, I think, 1937 or something.
So this one says the first successful airship was constructed by Henry Givert in France in 1852. Givert built a 160 kilogram, 250 pound steam engine capable of developing 3 horsepower to carry the engine weight. So that was the successful. Okay, the one that you just mentioned. Yeah, the Hindenburg in 1936.
Yeah.
Germany inaugurated. And I think, anyway, it's always difficult to do research while you're on air.
No, but
Anyway,
the point is 1897 event is very much possible with that time of technology. It's just like, and look, they saw one ship on few major cities. Let's just say it was sighted on 20 different cities. So they only built 20 ships and they flew over different places just to create a event, which is
yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying that it's impossible, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, it is the idea that it would have been sort of a like a precursor to a black project, because nobody sort of was aware that anybody was building it, and you
Mhm.
would have to have a lot of resources and personnel working on it in order to make it a reality. So the fact that nobody was aware of somebody actually building these things, it would have at least to be some kind of black project in the 19th century that we're talking about.
They probably have those things because, like, look, 50, I don't know, but I don't think that they were just. I think it was much easier to control the narrative and hide stuff because there is no way of communication. People
Well,
were just sending mails. That was the only way of communication at that time, or telegrams. That telegram is still the same thing. So it is quite possible, but I'm not saying that there is no other explanation, because those drawings which you see from 1897, they look from that era. They don't look futuristic at all.
yeah. Anyway, let's drop the airship. I just did want to mention it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
interesting. Also, sort of the Collins report afterwards. He also makes Reza says, the idea of the Collins elite, which sort
Mhm.
of is a group within the UAP conspiracy theories, that sort of thinks more in biblical terms about these things and tries to hide and suppress this information. He thinks the Collins elite got their name from this sort of person, Colin, who gave that information about these airships, and then they sort of became alert because there's more to it than this, actually. If you listen to the whole clip, there was this story that he tells later on that the government, the U.S. government, became alert because there was also a story floating around that one of these airships was going to bomb Cuba at some point, and and that they wanted to sort of find out what the hell's going on, because they didn't give permission to bomb Cuba because there was the Mexican War and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a whole backstory to this, and we don't have time to get into all of that. But it's a really strange and bizarre story. I actually have way more clips, but I think we should sort of end with some more time anomalies, because that's what we were here about. And then I think we'll do one more episode on this in the next one.
Mhm.
You ready?
Yeah. Let's go.
Okay. So this is we'll end with some really nice stuff. We mentioned him in the last show, Michael Cremo, who wrote Forbidden Knowledge, and he actually wrote a second book much later, which was the reaction to Forbidden Knowledge. If you read or check, if you read the book, it's a very dry book. It's only facts, right? It's not a story. He's just going case after case from newspapers and scientific research back then, and he compiled the book without sort of giving his own opinion in it. He just compiled data, and he gave the different views, perspectives on the data, right, from critics and supporters, and then he presented that data in that book. It's a really thick book. He has a lot of cases in it. It's very dry, but it's also super interesting. But this interview sort of gives some of the highlights from that book.
And some years later, a very prominent scientist, William H. Holmes, who worked at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., said in print, if Dr. Whitney had understood the theory of human evolution as we understand it today, he wouldn't have come to those conclusions, despite the imposing array of testimony with which he was confronted. In other words, he said he should have known, Whitney should have known that couldn't possibly be true. Because, and Holmes directly said this, if his discoveries, Holmes said directly that the main reason Whitney's discoveries shouldn't be accepted is because of the Java Man discoveries that had been made by Dubois in Java. So anything human had to be after that, much more recent than Whitney's finds. So after that, Whitney's discoveries were no longer mentioned in the scientific publications.
So that is the first clip that I want to play from that. So that's basically Whitney was one of those researchers, one of many who sort of found evidence that there was that humanity goes way, 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 way back, like it existed way longer than we think it existed. And back then, people were researching on an individual level. There were, there was not like an organization or an institution that was sort of managing these different groups. And there was not sort of an overall view or vision of, what was supposed to be thought. And that came sort of later. And this is sort of an example as sort of as these institutions grew in power, and especially as the Smithsonian get more and more involved, there was sort of one narrative about who we are and where we came from, and sort of diverging narratives that went against that official narrative were sort of filtered out of the mainstream. And this is sort of one example that he gives. But what he found out is also very interesting.
Very interesting. You've done a really good job of going through the literature on this topic and reviewing it. But he wrote, if this kind of evidence that you're presenting in your book is to be taken seriously, it would mean a revision not only of our understanding of human origins, but the whole origin of species. So yes, it's possible that one could explain this evidence by radically altering the timeline for evolution, not just of human beings, because the human beings have to come from something. The evidence that I've documented in Forbidden Archaeology, according to William Howells, would have placed humans before the apes and monkeys evolved. So it would involve a pretty radical shift.
Well, maybe let's.
So that is sort of, what we're talking about here with his book, is that he has so much evidence that it would sort of disrupt the timeline altogether. I'm gonna just go through these clips one by one.
I deal with deep time, And the archaeological evidence, if we look at all of it and not just what's in today's textbooks, puts a human presence going back tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of years. So that means, if it's taken seriously, that we need new explanations for human origins. But in Forbidden Archaeology, I didn't give an alternative explanation.
That's true. You didn't? Right. I got two more. I got this one.
The bulk of the cases were stone tools and weapons, and some cases of human skeletal remains, and in some cases human footprints found in layers of rock that are older than would be allowed by current theories. So most of this evidence that's in the main body of the book can be sourced in scientific literature, peer-reviewed scientific publications of the past 150 or so years. Some of the extreme anomalies didn't make time.
Okay, so one of the most extreme cases, or the oldest case in your book, is the case of these hematite balls, spheres found in a mine in South Africa. Is that right?
Yes. Those came to my attention originally through what is called a tabloid newspaper that deals with all kinds of extreme phenomena. But I didn't include it in the book, Forbidden Archaeology, simply because of the tabloid newspaper report. I got in touch with the director of the Museum of Natural History in Klerksdorp, South Africa, where the objects were said to be stored. And he wrote back to me, yes, these objects do exist. There's not very much published about them in the scientific literature, but they are there. So on that.
So do you want to see them?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this will be the final clip, and then we'll round it up. Let's see. Here we go.
Metallic spheres were found by miners in Precambrian strata, said to be a fantastic 2.8 billion years old.
Billion.
The controversy centers around the fine grooves encircling some of the spheres. Lab technicians were at a loss to explain how they could have been formed by any known natural process. According to the curator of the Klerksdorp Museum, Rolf Mars, these spheres are a complete mystery. They look man-made, yet at the time in Earth's history when they came to rest on this rock, no intelligent life existed. They're like nothing I've ever seen before.
So that's also an example, one of the lesser examples that he holds in his hand there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut it off here. We've gone long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, like usual, I got more clips, more stuff.
Yeah. Is there a show after us?
No, what?
Is there a show after our show?
No, yeah, we got some more leeway. Douglas' show will be on 11 p.m. from now on instead of 10 p.m.
That's
so
good. That's good.
Yeah, so that he doesn't have to worry and we don't have to worry.
That's a good.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah. Good for all of us. Yeah.
So yeah, so this is these are some of the time travel theories, right? We did the Philadelphia experiment. We talked about Ashton Forbes. So you saw Ashton Forbes talking to Reza Jorjani back there.
Mm-hmm.
MH370 is of course a classic case if it's true. We also did shows on that. Maybe we can do a little bit more about that next time.
Yeah.
And then we got the Bitcoin story, time travel theory, and Race Us.
Yeah. By the way, we never even touch the religious encounters of time traveling. For example, in Christianity and Islam, there are seven sleeper story where these seven sleepers entered in a cave and they came out after 300 years. For them, it was just like one, like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, but then the centuries have passed and they were avoiding the persecution of Christian because they were Christians and Romans were persecuting Christians at that time. So they were trying to save their life and they took a refuge in that cave. When they came out, everyone turned into a Christian, and the whole Rome had like a Christianity as the main religion. So God showed them a miracle. There's a miracle story that God showed them that how
So this
Christianity.
one, Seven Sleepers of Ephesus.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a Christianity story, and then there is a whole chapter of these people in Quran as well.
Yeah, they do mention Islam there.
Yes, but this is like a they were the Christians. They were like running away from Roman persecution.
I never heard of that story. Interesting.
Yes, it's a very interesting story. And they just went in the cave, and that cave turned into this whole thing. And there is a part when the Romans tried to enter the cave, they were unable to enter it. Because the moment they tried to enter, something happened to them and they run away from the cave. So God was protecting them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at these kind of stories from different cultures.
Yeah.
I don't know that many time travel stories from.
Oh, there are plenty.
Yeah.
So this is a very good story. And then there is also a character is called Al Khidr. Khizr.
Yeah.
It's an Islamic story. He was a time traveler too, and he was not only just time traveling, he was going back in the past and changing the timeline. So that's
Okay.
yeah. So he actually met Moses, Prophet Moses.
Is that a renowned Tunisian physician?
No. He's like, so he had like different names in Iranian, like in Persian culture. I think they mention him not in Iranian. In Epic of Gilgamesh, I think he is known as Atanafistim. This guy is mentioned in so many different cultures, and Islamic name of him is Khizr, the green one. And this story is
Green
revolve.
one?
Yeah, Al Khizr means the green one. Wherever he goes, I think he used to wear green color clothing or something.
Or lizard people?
No. He was a man, but he was like either around the green area or he was always like wearing the green cloak or something. It could be a lizard man or something. But yeah, he was actually, there is like encounters of him that he showed Moses that he was going and changing the past for the future. And that's like a whole story. So it's not even that you can actually go and change the past, but as long as the impact is positive.
The green arrow.
The green arrow. So yeah, there are plenty of stories like that, and maybe we will do one episode on that, or maybe in the next one I'll try to gather more stories from different religions where the time traveler doing time traveling thing.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stuff that came out. Right, we haven't talked about Immaculate Conception, the whistleblower that came out. There's a lot of stuff about disinformation and misinformation. There was a whole interview on that, which was super interesting.
Yeah,
so relevant to what we are talking about. There's the Catherine also Fitz interview that we still haven't touched upon. We have the whole thing with Ashton Forbes that's blowing up with the satellite. The pyramid thing is still ongoing. Dark Journalist did some really cool stuff, which actually had some clips from Dark Journalist, because he has done a lot of research to the mystery schools, but also Edgar Cayce, who was like somebody who could see into the future, which also ties into Atlantis. You got Atlantis, you got Antarctica, you got the moon, you got
yeah, so much. But yeah, everybody go and read Seven Sleeper story. It's very important. It's a very interesting and underrated story.
And I also linked some stuff from Skinwalker Ranch, because at Skinwalker Ranch in, I think, season 3, they also discovered time anomalies, missing time, portals, because portals are also sort of connected to this whole time travel thing. And, the thing that Racer Giuliani and Townsend Brown and, all these kind of people are talking about, the MH370 is going through a portal, right? So portals, time travel, time anomalies. And David Paulides also did he also has some, well, so basically, the missing 411, that people who suddenly disappear, they're there one moment and next moment they're gone, even if they're with friends and family. He also discovered time anomalies in those cases, not only that they're gone in the flesh, but also there was a whole tribe, which I'm still trying to find that story, but he's talking about there's a whole Indian tribe that disappeared in a certain area. I forgot the name. And then he actually did research with some scientists in that location, and they also sort of could reproduce a time anomaly that was recorded there. I'm not sure if I can find that and link it down below, but if I can, I will, and maybe we can sort of talk about that next time.
Yeah.
But there's sort of a lot of stuff that is connected to the missing people, UFOs, right? People who experience UFOs continuously have time lapses, lost time, warping of time and space, all these, and, energy fluctuations and things that can't grow on the spot where UAPs land, and, radioactive phenomena that are connected to it. So anyway, I'm pretty wasted. But I do want to say one thing, because last time we were talking about Bitcoin and, prices, and we did a prediction. And right now, Bitcoin is booming.
Yeah, but I think it's about to go down now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Because
it just did. I see.
Yeah.
We're back down to 100.
Yeah, I think downward spiral is starting for a while, for a few months. Let's see.
Few months. Oh my god.
Or consolidation period. I'm not saying it's gonna crash, but it depends on the world war situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if like a serious war start, which it could, I'm not even sure about Pakistan India thing that it's over. I don't think it's over. There will be something starting soon, and if it prolong and then other shit's happening in the Middle East, it could go sideways or something. Just hope for the best. Yeah.
When I look at the market right now, I'm not very happy. Okay, wait. Paul said, no way, everyone is calling for 150K in the next 10 days.
I don't think so. Let's see. I don't think it's going to 150K in next 10 days.
But I think, Paul, you said that, what was it? Next Friday, you are expecting a pump? What did you say, Paul? I think there's a lag also between what we're saying and what they are saying. So anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's hope Monday this week. Yeah, that's true. You have curated a ton of articles. I'll link one down below the video that for people who are interested.
Yeah.
There's a lot of price predictions out there. I'm myself, I'm still bullish. But maybe you're right. Maybe it will be. Usually around this time, it's a bad time, right? Normally.
Okay, I can digest that 115K by end of the month. That is still possible, but 150K impossible.
Okay.
It could pump all the way up to 115 and then start a downward trend from that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was looking at some of the patterns. I think there's like a good chance of a big pump at the in the start of June and end of this month. That is a possibility depending on the current affairs. If we see a big war, and I think 22nd is a very dangerous date. Let's see, 21st or 22nd of this month, there could be something big happen that day.
Why is that?
Well, you will laugh, but it's like astrological thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of astrologers are saying that. Even though I don't believe on them, but I started to believe on astrology. That's actually a big change on me too. Because like a lot of astrologers predicted Pakistan India war on the exact dates, and I was laughing. I was like, there is no way Pakistan and India go to war because there was nothing. And then suddenly they started to go to war from 7th till 10th May. This
And
is the day.
they predicted literally a war
These
between.
dates. Yeah, Pakistan and India going to war on these dates, and that happened. And then they said 22nd could be a very dangerous day.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
let's see. Yeah.
By the way, my name is Nick, not Peace, but I do believe in peace. I forgot to change it. But let's wrap it up. It was a lot of fun. I think we covered a lot of ground, and yeah, we learned something about blimps and about time travel. And yeah, maybe next one will also be about time anomalies, or we'll do something else.
All
I
right.
don't know.
Okay, man. Oh, see ya. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.